She was sweeping the range day until a Special Forces veteran challenged her into a deadly trial. The sun beat down mercilessly on the military training range. Dust swirled with every gust of wind, coating everything in a thin brown layer. Most people barely noticed the woman pushing an old broom across the cracked concrete. She was just the cleaning lady, and her name, Maria, was hardly known. Maria worked quietly, day after day, tidying up after soldiers who barely acknowledged her presence. She wasn't young anymore. Wrinkles framed her eyes, her back bent from years of hard labor. Still, she carried herself with a gentle dignity, humming softly as she swept away bullet casings and debris from another live-fire exercise. What no one knew was that Maria had once lived through war, not as a soldier, but as a mother in a village torn apart. She had seen hunger, violence, and loss. And yet, instead of bitterness, she carried kindness like a shield, giving, serving, and never asking for anything in return. That morning, as she pushed her broom across the firing line, a group of trainees laughed nearby. Among them stood a retired Special Forces veteran named Captain James Holloway, brought in as a guest instructor. Hardened by decades of combat, his presence commanded respect. He watched the woman sweeping, her hands trembling slightly from the weight of the broom. "Ma'am," Holloway called out, his voice rough but curious. "You ever fire one of these?" He nodded toward the rifles stacked on the table. Maria froze. The soldiers chuckled under their breath. A cleaning lady with a rifle. It sounded absurd. She lowered her eyes, whispering, "No, sir. My job is just to keep the place clean." But Holloway didn't smile. Something in her humility stirred a challenge in him. "Tell you what," he said, "one shot, right there." He pointed at a steel target almost 300 yards away. "If you hit it, you're done for the day. No more sweeping." The soldiers erupted in laughter. Maria's cheeks flushed red. She wanted to walk away, but then she remembered her son, a boy who never came home from war. He had always told her, Mom, bravery isn't about fighting. It's about standing up when people expect you to fall." With a quiet nod, Maria put down her broom. Holloway raised an eyebrow, surprised. He handed her a rifle, watching carefully as she cradled it with trembling hands. He expected her to fumble, but instead, Maria held the weapon with an odd familiarity, as if the weight was not foreign to her. No one knew that during her village's darkest days, Maria had once been forced to pick up an old rifle to defend her children. She hadn't touched the weapon in decades, but some things, once learned, never leave you. The range fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Maria took a slow breath, her finger resting gently on the trigger. Her aim wavered for a moment, a broken bar, and then steadied. Crack! The steel rang out, a clear echo across the desert. Dead center. The laughter died instantly. Every soldier's jaw dropped, their disbelief written plain across their faces. Holloway himself blinked, stunned. He had trained snipers who couldn't make that shot cleanly on their first try. Maria lowered the rifle, her hands steady now. She didn't smile or gloat. She simply whispered, "My son taught me to never miss." Then she picked up her broom again. But Holloway wasn't about to let it end there. "Ma'am," he said, his voice softer now, "that wasn't luck. That was skill." Maria shook her head gently. "Skill fades, but love stays. I only did it for him." For the first time, the hardened veteran felt something crack inside his chest. He had buried too many brothers, carried too many ghosts. He looked at this frail woman, not a soldier, not a warrior by title, yet carrying more strength in her heart than he had ever seen on the battlefield. The soldiers who had mocked her fell silent with shame. One of them stepped forward awkwardly, taking the broom from her hands. "Ma'am, a broken bar. You shouldn't have to clean up after us." "Not anymore." From that day, Maria wasn't just a cleaning lady. She became part of their unit's story, and a woman who reminded them that true courage wasn't about rank, muscle, or medals. It was about love, humility, and the strength to keep going when the world tried to break you. Holloway visited her often after that, not to talk about guns or war, but about humanity, about loss, about healing. In Maria's quiet wisdom, he found something he hadn't known. He was searching for a peace. Months later, when the unit graduated, Maria stood at the back of the ceremony, broom in hand. But this time, every soldier turned and saluted her, not as a cleaner, not as a bystander, but as a teacher of resilience. Tears welled in Maria's eyes. But she didn't cry. She just whispered the same words her son once told her. Bravery isn't about fighting. It's about standing up when people expect you to fall. And on that training range, under the same hot sun, a room full of hardened soldiers learned that the greatest battles aren't fought with rifles. They're fought with compassion, and they're won with love. Weeks passed after Maria stunned the soldiers on the range. Word about the cleaning lady who outshot the recruits spread quietly through the base. At first, it was told as a funny story, but slowly, it became something more. The young soldiers began to notice Maria differently. Some would stop to greet her. Others would carry her buckets or clear the heavy trash bags before she could. What used to be mocking chuckles turned into respect-filled silence whenever she walked by. One evening, after training, Holloway found Maria sitting on the edge of the range, broom leaning against her shoulder. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He sat beside her without saying a word for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Maria didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, as though she were watching something far away, something no one else could see. "In my village," she said softly. "The day soldiers came, I wasn't ready. None of us were. But when you are a mother, and you hear your children cry from fear, a broken bar, you learn. You learn very fast." Holloway swallowed hard. He had seen war break seasoned men, but here sat a woman who had endured the same fires and emerged with kindness intact. "You could have been one of us," he murmured. Maria shook her head gently. "No, Captain, I could not. Soldiers fight to win. Mothers fight so others don't have to." Her words landed like bullets of truth. For a man who had lived his life behind rifles and battle orders, the simplicity of her answer disarmed him more than any enemy ever had. That night, Holloway gathered the soldiers in the barracks. "You've all been training to be warriors," he told them. "But Maria, she reminded us what that word should mean. Strength isn't just about muscle or aim. It's about love strong enough to carry pain, and still choose kindness." The soldiers listened, many with lowered heads, realizing that the woman they had once dismissed had given them a lesson their instructors never could. Over time, Maria's presence changed the atmosphere on the base. Recruits volunteered for extra cleaning shifts, not out of duty, but out of respect for her. Some began writing letters home more often, others treating local civilians with more compassion during exercises. And Holloway, he found himself visiting Maria's small apartment in town. She always had tea ready, and stories to share, not about battles, but about life, about her son, about hope. He never admitted it out loud, but in her humble living room, Holloway found something he had lost years ago, the feeling of family. Months later, Maria grew ill. Nothing serious at first, just exhaustion that never seemed to leave. But when she stopped showing up at the range, the soldiers felt the emptiness immediately. They went to her home, bringing food, medicine, and laughter. The very men who had once mocked her now swept her floor, fixed her roof, and cooked her meals. When she recovered, she told them with tears in her eyes, "You boys gave me back what I thought I had lost, and the feeling that I still matter." And she did matter. More than medals, more than ranks, Maria became the soul of their unit, and the quiet reminder that behind every uniform, every gun, every command, there must always be humanity. Years later, long after Holloway retired and the soldiers had scattered across the world, the story of Maria lived on. They didn't tell it as a tale of a cleaning lady with a perfect shot. They told it as a story about courage, about love, about the power of one simple woman to change hardened men into better human beings. And for every soldier who ever set foot on that range, the lesson remained. The strongest warriors are not the ones who win battles. They are the ones who never stop choosing love, even when life gives them every reason to hate. Years later, the dusty training range was gone. A new, modern facility stood in its place, sharper, cleaner, filled with technology. But in the corner of the base, near the firing line, stood something unusual, a small bronze plaque. It read simply, "Maria A." She swept the dust from our boots, and the fear from our hearts. Her strength was love. It wasn't ordered by generals. It wasn't funded by the government. The soldiers who had once trained under Holloway had pooled their own money to make it. Every year, new recruits would stop and ask, "Who was Maria?" And every year, the story would be told. Some recruits laughed at first, just as the old ones had. But by the end of the tale, when they heard how a cleaning lady humbled an entire unit with one shot and countless acts of compassion, they stopped laughing. They stood straighter. They thought differently about what it meant to be strong. Captain Holloway, long retired, made a habit of visiting the range once a year. He would stand by the plaque in silence, a small flower in his hand. To the world, he had been a soldier, a leader, a warrior. But in his heart, he carried the lesson Maria had given him. Strength is not how steady your trigger finger is. Strength is how steady your heart is when life pushes you to the ground. One afternoon, a group of young soldiers spotted him there. Curious, they approached. "Sir, did you really know her, the woman on the plaque?" one asked. Holloway turned, his weathered face softening with memory. "Yes," he said quietly, "and I'll tell you something, out of all the people I served with, men with medals, men with scars, Maria was the bravest of us all, because she never let the world take her kindness away." The recruits didn't fully understand then, but the words sank deep. Years later, when those same young men faced their own battles, they remembered them. Maria herself lived simply until her final days. She never asked for recognition, never sought glory. Yet the soldiers she had touched never let her be forgotten. They kept her memory alive not just in words, but in actions, helping the weak, standing up for the overlooked, carrying compassion even into war zones. Her broom had swept more than dust. It had swept pride from hearts, bitterness from souls, and reminded everyone that humanity must never be abandoned. And so, Maria's story became more than a tale told on a base. It became a quiet legend, a reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and sometimes, the greatest warriors begin their battles with nothing more than a broom in their hands and love in their hearts.